look, if you're not a virtuous citizen and you're a capitalist, like a self-interested, hedonistic capitalist, free market, individualist, you're going to be guilty because you're not oriented in the proper direction, let's say towards the highest of all things. And the problem with being guilty is that when the mob comes for you and accuses you, you're going to be guilty, and then you're going to do foolish things like abide by ESG statutes, let's say, and try to backpedal because you're guilty for what you've done. And it is exactly as you said, because the sacred duties of citizenship and the identity that goes along with that, which is actually psychologically protective in the highest degree, that's been sacrificed. And part of what's happened too is now that's being replaced by this insistence that only subjectivity defines identity, which is an unbelievably immature and pathological insistence. And so that fractionates and alienates everyone on the basis of their subjectivity. And that also facilitates the transfer of responsibility and power to the people at the top of the towers of Babel. So revitalization of citizenship in its broadest sense, that's absolutely necessary.
And this is one of my failures in woke Inc. It was one of my regrets in that last book is that I didn't do anything with this idea of citizenship, and that was the gaping hole that led me to write this new book. So that's at the heart of Nation of Victims, actually. And there's a chapter in the book called A Theory of Duty. It plays on the John Rawls trope of a theory of justice. I think that David Hume had a famous thought experiment about the missing shade of blue. He believed that he could infer from a spectrum of shades of blue, a shade of blue that was missing from that. He could tell you exactly how it looked without ever having seen it, but it's what he called his missing shade of blue. I call this the missing shade of red for the American conservative movement, is this theory of duty. And so if I had to pick up a chapter of the book that was the most important, it was the chapter entitled A Theory of Duty. And I think that was part of what I missed in even what was, in retrospect, a more myopic perspective that I brought to bear in Woke Inc. that I hope at least begins the project of filling out that vacuum in Nation of Victims.
I think you can think about it hierarchically, and that's the most effective way to do it. You owe yourself, your extended self, you owe a duty, which means you have to act in a manner in the present that doesn't sacrifice your medium to long-term viability and well-being. And I think the voice of conscience and the voice of meaning are pointers to that. And so when your conscience calls you on your misbehavior, it's because you're subordinating your long-term sustainability and growth to the hedonistic and impulsive demands of the present. And so you're acting in a very immature way. You're not making the proper sacrifices, even in relation to yourself. And then you have to have someone along for the ride, someone that you commit to over the long run, a wife or a husband who you bind yourself together with and struggle through life with. And then that's a foundation for a family. And that family, the children in your family, they remind you. I just watched Bill Burr's new special. It was quite funny, very politically incorrect. And Bill Burr has a real temper and he doesn't control it well by his own admission. And he says his 2.5 to 4-year-old daughter, so over a 2-year span, has been a signal, what would you call it? Moderator of his temper, because when he gets upset, his daughter has learned to come and pat him on the shoulder and tell him that he's going off the handle and that he should be careful and that he doesn't have to be so upset. And your children do modify you if you set the circumstance up right to keep the harmonious balance of life going in your family. You have to modify your own stupidity, and that keeps you sane. And then you do that with your family in relationship to your local community, and then the state and the province, and then the national sphere and the business sphere and the sphere of your friends. And then you can think of mental health not as something that's subjectively defined or even subjectively experienced, but as the felt sense of the harmonious balance between all these different levels of identity stemming from you all the way out to the broadest possible sphere. And that is, as Vivek pointed out, that's something conservatives haven't figured out, is that you can sell to young people, and I've seen this in my lectures, you can sell people young people the idea of multidimensional social identity and responsibility as a solution to their problems of nihilism and meaninglessness. And it's the genuine solution. It's not an ideology or a band-aid solution. It's like, that's life, to do all those things at once properly. And that is it's a gaping hole in our culture that isn't being filled by much at the moment. Your cynicism about those things, especially when you're young, doesn't justify your lack of participation. Of course they're corrupt and blind, partly because no young people are in there working diligently to set them right. Now, I mean, young people have things to learn too, but they can at least be eyes for the blind.